Ahoy, and welcome. This is Admiral. We've been holding our horses for quite some time, waiting for some more African civilizations. So I'm here to bless the rains down in Africa, with a cavalry empire that used the rains to rain down in Africa for many centuries, the Kanembu. Now you might ask, Kanembu who? To which I would say, don't cry, it's just a civilization concept. Let's check it out. Here's a nutshell history of Kanem-Bornu. Early dates are approximate. The Kanem Empire as such likely formed around 700 AD, including a variety of ethnic groups, but especially Kanuri groups like the Zagawa, pastoral nomads noted as raiders and traders, who fought with and were influenced by the more settled Sao peoples around Lake Chad. Much of the empire existed within the Sahel, a transition zone between the dry Sahara and the wetter savannas to the south, with a common climate of semi-desert or steppe. The dryness made it challenging for horses, which could be bred in limited numbers, but they faced another danger in the wetter areas around Lake Chad, the tsetse fly, which ultimately limited viability in those areas as well. But the drier regions were well suited to camels, which were introduced around the 5th century. Around the 11th century, the empire converted to Islam under the Saifawa dynasty, which would last until the mid-1800s. The empire reached its greatest extent under the king Ormai Dunama Dibalemi in the mid-1200s. Dibalemi significantly increased the Kanem Empire's military adoption of cavalry, which required mass importation of horses, and did so about a century earlier than the Mali Empire. He used this cavalry very effectively in a series of campaigns against many neighboring non-Muslim peoples, upon whom he declared jihad. His successes in conquest and conversion massively expanded the Kanem Empire to its greatest territorial extent, and secured control of lucrative trans-Saharan trade routes. Main Kanembu exports were slaves, salt, and animal products, but they also profited from controlling passage through the routes and levying fees and duties on traders using them. Dibalemi expanded on previous diplomatic relations with the nearby Muslim world, building a hostel in Cairo for Kanem pilgrims and scholars, and sending embassies to Tunisia. Described as a warrior on fire, his flame burned brightly until he ran out of oxygen. After his death, a succession conflict broke out, and many of the recent conquests were eventually lost, even including core ancestral lands in Kanem, whereafter Mai Umar Idrismi relocated the imperial government to Bornu in modern Nigeria. After about a century of civil war and indecisive external conflict, the empire began to regain its footing under powerful rulers like Ali Gaji and Idris Katagamarbe, who re-established order and regained control of the ancient heartland of Kanem. The greatest Mai of the Bornu phase was Idris IV, posthumously Idris Aluma, who revolutionized the military by importing Ottoman firearms and employing Turkish advisors to train his soldiers, building forts to secure the trade routes, and expanding the use of camel cavalry, among many other things. With these advantages, he was able to re-expand the empire considerably, although not to the extent of Dibalemi. After many battles, he was eventually killed by an archer in 1603. The empire once again began to decline as its lifeblood of trans-Saharan trade was eclipsed by the transatlantic, although the empire endured a further 300 years beyond AoE2's timeframe. In Age of Empires 2, the Kanembu offered the opportunity to depict a large and enduring Central African pastoral civilization with extensive use of cavalry and camels, and an unusual emphasis on the market as the medium to manifest their strengths. Their campaign would of course feature the many battles of Idris Aluma. Before we get into the bonuses or tech tree, I'm going to note that the Kanembu have access to 3 previously unique or limited regional units or buildings. First, the Camel Scout as a trainable unit and their starting scout. Second, pastures as replacements for farms. And third, caravanserais, none of which will appear in the list of civilization bonuses, as they will now be regional units and buildings shown in the technology tree. The pasture's base work rate will be decreased, with the faster work rate being a specific bonus for the Khitans. I was a hair away from giving them steppe lancers as well, and actually still think it's an idea with a lot of merit. Much of the Sahel is literally steppe climate, and as in many other civilizations, long spears or lances were such a classic cavalry weapon among the Kanembu. Like existing civilizations that currently have the steppe lancer, they also have major nomadic and pastoral influences. Even the non-elite version looks semi-plausibly Middle Eastern or North African, at least far more so than the knights, and the Kanembu sometimes imported armor from those regions. I didn't ultimately go for that as the design is cleaner with Knightline, but I'm curious what y'all think about this. Certainly the exclusivity of the lance to Central Asian civilizations is completely arbitrary, and armies look cooler with lancers, but that's arguably a regional skin issue as much as anything. You can make good arguments for instead adding new African or Middle Eastern regional units, like a more generic version of the Camel Archer or Steppe Lancer, or salt mines as gold reskins or variants, which salt mines I would absolutely recommend for an official design. But for simplicity and practicality here, I'm not proposing any with this build. I'm a huge fan of the idea of optional regional skins for appropriate flavor, but otherwise, why not work with what we already have before insisting on loads of entirely new, unique, or regional units after 2 DLCs that have been quite loaded with both. With all that out of the way, let's get into the civilization bonuses. First off, stable and market upgrades cost no food. We're going to focus on the stable aspect here, as that's most relevant for 1v1s, where the obvious comparison is with the similar Burgundian bonus of 50% cheaper stable technologies. The Kanembu advantage is that their bonus is stronger in early game, as they have access to bloodlines and have a higher discount on light cavalry, and even get husbandry for free since it's entirely food cost, although you still have to take the time to research it. The Burgundian advantages are in the synergy with the earlier availability of the Cavalier upgrade, and their access to expensive Imperial upgrades, Hussar and Paladin. If the Kanembu research all their stable technologies, they save 1,110 resources, whereas if the Burgundians do the same, they save 2,050 resources. Of course, the Kanembu also save on market technologies, which is another 1,000 resources, but 3 of those are useless for other civilizations in a 1v1. So the food savings for Kanembu are irrelevant for purposes of comparison, but still useful for another reason we'll see. Next up, markets add 15 housing space and can garrison villagers. Simple enough, it saves 75 wood on 3 houses, ultimately discounting your market and providing a defensive option for villagers working near the market. A sizable portion of the economy was devoted to trade in one way or another, and defensible oasis towns, or later, rebats or fortifications, provided protection for the populace and especially those involved in trade. The final civilization bonus is that stables and town centers work 8% faster for each market technology researched. As mentioned, the power and prosperity of Kanem-Bornu was directly linked to its enviable location and control of the valuable trans-Saharan trade routes. Their exports were their most significant source of wealth, and their imports their greatest key to military dominance, including mass importation of horses that were not ideal for breeding in the Sahel, and were subject to attrition from tsetse flies. This bonus takes some time and investment to get going, although less so given their market bonuses, and can eventually yield 32% faster production from stables and town centers, effectively serving as a second conscription specific to those buildings. Team bonus is that caravan and guilds are 50% cheaper and available in feudal age. The cheaper techs are more for your allies, since you already don't pay food for them, although it doesn't hurt that the 200 gold cost of both caravan and guilds is cut down to 100 each. But the early availability is especially for the Kanembu. For team games, this will help everyone get their trade going a little faster, as well as enabling guilds for civilizations other than the Saracens and Hindustanis that don't otherwise have it, and making it more affordable. For the Kanembu, this makes their stable and town center bonus a little more practical and single player, and enables it as early as feudal age. It's still a decent investment at 100 gold for guilds in feudal, although that can pay off soon enough with more favorable trading and faster stables in town centers. You can also grab caravan for 100 gold, and in castle age, coinage also for 100 gold, and finally banking at some point in imperial for 200 gold. So there's some echoes of the Saracens here in terms of what is effectively a market discount, and discounted early availability of guilds, but not so much as to steal the Saracens' thunder, and ultimately with an unusual twist. The unique unit is the Chimagana, an affordable cavalry unit with some mild but useful features. The name refers to a junior fief holder or territorial administrator who is responsible for collecting tribute, organizing and sometimes leading troops for campaigns, raids, or defensive operations, and especially protecting the valuable trade routes. They're sometimes described as masters of the frontier. As such, their first unique attribute is that they can be trained at the caravanserai in addition to the castle, and giving you some reason to build that structure in a 1v1. They also have an aura effect for all of your mounted units. I really do think this unit has to be a type of commander given their role in mobilizing soldiers. Still, the effect is milder and more limited than that of the Centurion. It increases the movement and attack speed of all your mounted units by 2% each, to a maximum of 12%. By contrast to the Centurion's all-or-nothing effect, and the relative redundancy of having multiple Centurions, so you'll want 6 of them for ideal performance. The effect is still powerful for cavalry, as the speed alone enables you to choose your fights and raid more effectively, and the bit of extra attack speed doesn't hurt either. Stat-wise, it's quite similar to Knightline, with the same movement speed as camels, and has 1 more pierce armor than cavaliers in Imperial Age. The Castle Age unique technology is called Dibelemian Zealotry, after the famous king Ormai, Dunama Dibelemi, who waged many expansive wars in the name of jihad. Like the old Saracen zealotry technology, it affects camels, and for the Kanembu, adds 1 pierce armor and it provides 4 gold for every villager killed by your mounted units. Raiding was a pillar of the Kanembu economy for most of its history, and their most profitable export was slaves captured in raids and campaigns. This secondary effect is similar to both the secondary effect of chieftains and one of the Mapuche civ bonuses, but doesn't technically overlap with either, as the villager bounty for Vikings is only for infantry kills, and the Mapuche cavalry bonus is only for killing enemy military units. The Imperial Age unique technology is Alumin Imports, after Idris Aluma. The tech has 2 parts. First off, hand cannoneers gain 3 pierce armor and a bonus versus buildings. The Kanembu did not have much advanced siege technology, and even appear to have been roughly comparable to American civilizations in that regard, and did not use cannons within the game's time frame. However, under the reign of Idris Aluma, they did import a decent quantity of personal firearms from the Turks, who they enlisted to train their soldiers with those weapons, creating a musketeer corps clad in iron helmets. There's at least one well-documented instance of using musketeers to lay siege to a walled city called Amsaka, by building high platforms that they could use to shoot into the city, and provide covering fire for their infantry to fill the ditch around the city, after which their cavalry could enter. This tech doesn't suddenly make it a good idea to charge a castle with hand cannoneers, although you could with ram cover or other distractions, but they can do work especially against standard buildings where your other town leveling options are fairly limited. Like the faster working town centers after the market techs, this helps you go Kanem-Boom. The second part of the technology enables light camel riders with a gold cost replaced by a lesser food cost. To clarify this, the Kanembu still have access to the typical heavy camel with the gold cost, but also have the option of the light or castle age camel rider as a trash unit costing only food. Very unusual to duplicate units in this way, but it increases the available options without adding fully new units or creating a situation where you'd have to deny the heavy camel upgrade. For the sake of a technology effect, that would only be preferable when you're running very low on gold. It's not as if everyone in your army is going to have the best weapons, armor, or training, so when you run out of gold, you can still train camel riders, but you'll be working with the B team. Like the Persian Commanderan technology, this discounts the total cost of the unit somewhat as well, rather than a 1-to-1 replacement. Trash camels end up more expensive than the scout line at 95 instead of 80 food, and with lower pierce armor and base attack, but with more hit points and of course the anti-cavalry bonus. By contrast to the Malians, who famously had loads of gold, trash camels seem to fit the Kanembu thematically. Idris doubled down on the usage of camels by importing more of them, along with horses, from North Africa. Now let's check out the technology tree. The Kanembu have decent ranged units, including arbalesters, and powerful hand cannoneers, and do have all of the archer armor upgrades. There's even some incentive towards going for cavalry archers in Castle Age, with discounted bloodlines and free husbandry, although that line dead ends in Imperial with no heavy cavalry archer or Parthian tactics. Despite the cavalry focus, mounted archery was not something emphasized in the region. The infantry is bad. No Imperial Age upgrades, and like the Tatars, they only get the first infantry armor upgrade. Their spear line is still situationally more usable than that of the Turks or Gurjaras, but not something you'd ever want past Castle Age. Their cavalry, of course, is great overall, ending up with generic light cavalry and cavaliers, heavy camels and trash light camels with discounted stable technologies and ultimately faster working stables, and a useful cavalry unique unit. Siege is pretty iffy. No siege ram, siege onager, heavy scorpion, or bombard cannon, but they do have siege engineers. The blacksmith misses 2 infantry armor technologies as mentioned. The navy is actually decent for an inland African civilization, and not just because of their emphasis on ships of the desert, as Aluma did make some improvements to boats on Lake Chad, but their navy does lack heavy demos. University is reasonably good. No fortified walls, architecture, bombard towers, incendiaries, or carvel hole, but they get everything else. They do get all castle technologies, and monasteries are full except for the lack of the very useful block printing technology. Economically, they miss both Castle Age mining technologies and two-man saw, but do get everything else, including, as we've seen, pastures replacing farms, and all pasture technologies. So, that's my concept for this Chad civilization. Let me know what you think. That's all for today, and thanks for watching. This has been me considering the case for a commercially competent cavalry and camel-centric central Chadian civilization, the Kanembu. Till next time.